so the expectations are really high, so bear with me because these events means a lot to me. And as one of the co-sponsors, there would be no event without some proper merchandising, isn't it? Who agrees with me? Oh, finally, good. So, to win these wonderful and amazing pens from the University of Sussex, I will ask you 5 very different questions and very difficult, okay? So, how many of you searched on LinkedIn one of the panelists? 1 point, take note of it. Second question, how many of you get upset when speaking over the phone with potentially a bot that is telling you, I don't understand you, agent, agent, agent? Good. So how many points? 2 points? Good. Top score, 2 points. Third question, how many of you invested in one of the dodgy cryptocurrencies? 3 points top score. Now we are getting close to the prize. How many of you have never collected one of those other dodgy things that are called non-fungible tokens? Let's go to the have. How many of you have collected one of those dodgy crypto kitties, crypto punks, you name it, we got it? How many 4s? Who? Then you will come and collect the prize. And now, bonus point. How many of you have heard about ordinals? Oh, fantastic. So if you got 4 or more, I think, Irina, you are number 5 at the moment. At the end, come and collect one of those lovely pens, courtesy of our sponsors. But the reason why I asked you this is that also from the word cloud, what we notice is that some of you might be familiar with Web3, others, maybe this is the first time and say, what the heck, what is Web3? And the reasons why we're here with this amazing panel is to try to give you a flavor of what it is for those who are not familiar with. And for those who know, bear with us, because it would be nice to level the playing field before we can enter the conversation after the lovely session we had with Sonya. So in order to start, as I have an amazing panel here, I would like to ask you to give a brief introduction of who you are and what brought you into Web3. And shall I start? Ladies first, sorry. So my name is Maria Restuccia. I am a lecturer at the business school at Sussex. And back in 2020, over the summer day, my husband started telling me, Maria, you should look into NFTs. And I was like, what, NFTs? And it was, for those of you who know it or don't know it, it's a non-fungible token. It's one of the words that comes up and up again when we talk about Web3. And I started looking at it because I was interested in the artists. And I started seeing artists that were selling NFTs, making a lot of money, famous, non-famous one, even kids raising money to pay the mortgage for their parents. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. And at the same time, I noticed that whenever I was mentioning NFTs to one of my colleagues or one of my friends or one of the people that I met in co-working space, the reaction that I got was Marmite style. So it was either hate it or love it. So as an academic, I could not dig deeper into this because I was curious. Why people are so passionate about this? So I applied for a grant, and If We Are Here is also courtesy of the British Academy, who decided to fund this research that is at the moment reaching its end. And I heard from lots of interesting artists that told me about their experience with NFTs. So I will not spoil anymore, and I will pass it over to Milo, who is here, and he's a partner with Brighton.
Yes, I'm Milo Bowman. I run Brighton Blockchain, which is a community of people in Brighton who are interested in blockchain. If you are one of those people, please do come along. We have regular events and we'll be happy to have you. I live and breathe Web3. It's everything I do, really, for many years now. I help people and brands and businesses just understand Web3. I think that's the main thing, but also things like accepting cryptocurrency payments and making NFTs and all that kind of stuff. And as for the Marmite style camp, I definitely do love Web3. And I'm proud to say that. I think there are definitely a lot of things that are less than perfect. I mean, there are a lot of scams in Web3. If you get into the world of cryptocurrency and NFTs, it's teeming with scams. There's also a culture of financial speculation, which I think is actually quite damaging. In my experience, most people who buy crypto or want to sort of speculate on it, they either lose money or they drastically underperform the general market. There are loads of problems, but my perspective is that I think this is a new technology. Like all new technologies have some problems. When electricity was invented, they also invented electric shocks, and lots of people died from playing around with electricity, right? Cars used to be really dangerous, but then we invented things like airbags and seatbelts and crumple zones and driving licenses and traffic lights. And so we can shape these new technologies into a positive direction. And it may start out being like a bit of a Wild West, but over time, with a lot of work and effort, I think we can move it in a positive direction. And that was actually one of the reasons why I started Brighton Blockchain, because one of the negative side effects of the internet I found was that we were just spending so much more time in front of a computer screen and so much less time in real life, talking to real people and connecting with people. And that was really negative and missing. I think we need to work to shape the technologies into the ways that they can be. But that is why I'm proud to say that I love Web3, because I do think that it will be shaped in a positive direction. And fundamentally, it is a new innovation. It's not going away. It's not going to be uninvented. And that's what makes me excited about it.
Thanks, Milo. So over to Sonya.
It's interesting because I don't think I actually answered this when I did my speech earlier. So as an introduction, I'm an entrepreneur, author, presenter, and content creator. And the reason I can be all of those things is because we're hyper connected. But for me, it's because I think we'd slightly be silly not to know that something else is coming, and how do we get not only in front of it, but how do we help create whatever the next phase is? I remember doing a dissertation, I remember doing a module in 2014 when I was at university on the Internet of Things. And my lecturer, who is now the associate dean of the university, is like this weird and wacky and wonderful man. And I was like, I loved his way of lecturing, but most people didn't. But it's because he had quite a futuristic outlook. And I remember one of our modules was to go to a virtual office in Mayfair. And that's the first time I saw a virtual office. And I was like, what is this? Like, no one's here. No one works from here. And yet a phone rings and someone picks it up and then it goes somewhere else. And like, so what's the premise of it? And it blew my mind. And now 10 years later, that's literally the life that we live, is we have virtual offices and remote working and co-working. And, we can kind of say anything from anywhere. And I think one of my biggest regrets in the nicest way is that when I was younger, when new mobile phones came, I was really excited. I was really they were intellectually driving me. I was like so concerned with what you can do, what you can't do, and be ahead of the game. And then somewhere along that line, I kind of lost it because you get so distracted with things. And one of my biggest regrets is probably not jumping on technology when it first started, just so that not only can you understand it, but you can intellectually invigorate your mind, because there's something unknown out there. And the universe is very much, in this magical space that you can create anything that you ultimately dream. And that is what I feel like with Web3. There is no way that we can't have a Web3 if we've got a 1 and 2, right? Like the world, there's just no way that it can't exist. However, I would say we don't know what that is exactly. And so that's the cool thing, is that we can kind of create this thing that doesn't really exist, but on our own terms and our own timings. And I think that's really what I enjoy, is if we're already going to be spending all our time online and using the internet, we might as well be a part of that change.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to break the stigma against Web3 and blockchain. My name is Kornel Kot, but before I dive into what I do, I'd like to give credit where it's due. Lavinia, who unfortunately can't make it here tonight, she's started Women in Blockchain Talks. And going back to your point, Sonya, earlier regarding women and someone saying that crypto dudes are the only people who are going to get rich. Women in Blockchain Talks has actually over 6,000 women part of the group, which are all involved in cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and more importantly, Web3. So there's a lot of space for women to get involved, and women are leading the charge in a lot of their areas, especially creative ones. So anyway, back to me. What I do is I run a company called WeConnect. It's a recruitment agency, but we also provide investment, software development, events. We've actually partnered up with Solana. So whoever knows a little bit about blockchain, we've partnered up with Solana last week. We've got hackathon happening right now in London. So if anyone wishes to find out a little bit more, please come up to me. I'll share the links with you. It's free. It's a networking space. You can be there 24/7, bring a sleeping bag. It's great. So back to what we do, and actually I'll start from the beginning. My background is actually in tech and AI. So I used to work in AI. I was in Taiwan for a year working for one of the largest semiconductor companies in the world, which sold up a chunk of the business because they realized how much potential there is in AI. So we were developing smart driving vehicles, self-driving vehicles, smart cameras, and that was on a corporate level. So it was super boring, not exciting. It was before all the hype came around, before ChatGPT. And there was a talk by a gentleman called Yann LeCun. Whoever here is in AI, they've probably heard of Yann LeCun. He's got almost 1 million followers on LinkedIn. And he spoke about the potential downfalls of AI, but how it was also going to be integrated with this thing called Web3. And it got me thinking, what is Web3? What is blockchain? The more I researched, the more I found out the possibilities surrounding it. I'm a very pragmatic and practical person. So I started looking at the useful cases of Web3. And trust me, there's a ton. It's changing a lot of industries. Having worked now with companies like, for example, KPMG, Deloitte. We know what's happening behind the scenes, who's hiring the different researchers for this type of technology. And it will dramatically, I wouldn't want to say disrupt, transform is a better word, practically all industries, from logistics to healthcare, all the way through to data ownership. And for anyone who has any specific questions, I'd love to break them down for you and tell you how you can apply it in different businesses, in different areas, and so on and so forth. But if just to wrap it up really quickly, history. People have never had access to the amount of information that they do today because of the internet. When the internet first came out, we had the dot-com bubble. I'm sure most people here remember that. There was a ton of companies which actually didn't provide any value, but they were just trying to jump in. This is kind of like what the Web3 space is right now. There's a ton of companies which are not providing value, but amongst all that dirt, there are true gems which are building phenomenal applications. And it's amazing to be at the intersection of being able to support some of those companies which are changing, for example, healthcare and democratizing people's patients, data, enabling people to have ownership and sell your own data rather than have other companies sell it for you behind closed doors. So the internet was built on the old approach that is being transformed through Web3, and that is through ownership of your things. So there's a couple companies that own the internet, Google, Microsoft, you name it. Within Web3, it's all about the people. So it's about empowerment. And all of you can be a part of it. That's the best part. And you can be rewarded. Anyway, without getting too technical, back to you.
Oh, absolutely. No, thanks, Kornel. So one of the questions that Sonya asked you is, what is Web3 for you? Web3 is. I just took the time before coming today to look at some of the headlines that had been somehow connected to Web3. And at first I saw something connected to NFTs from The Guardian back in 2021, shaking up the art world. That was the promise. Then we started doubting, are they really art NFTs? Then the great rush might be over, but are they in decline? And just as of today, the words that came out were worthless, dead, meant to change everything, but nothing changed really. So as you can see from here, and also from your word cloud, there is a lot of debate around it. So we heard from the public, we saw some of the headlines. Now I would like to ask each one of you, if you had to say in one word what Web3 is for you and why, just to bring in our perspectives on the topic that we've been looking at. So Sonya?
The next phase, just the next phase of life, the next phase of innovation, the next phase of where we're heading. I just think it's the next phase. And if you go back to history, you've seen these phases before. And I think we just need to be in a position where we are conscious that it's happening and conscious of what that means for what we as people are putting into the world and therefore giving away. And it's really interesting. I just want to raise a point. You said something about healthcare. It made me laugh because, and you all should try this actually tomorrow, is if you go to the doctors, you're like, hey, can I have my records? It's going to be really hard for you to get it. They don't just give away your records, even though that's your data. And it just made me think what you said. And it's like, the next phase is, if I've given you something, I should be able to take it back. Or if I have something, it should be mine to begin with. Why is it that you know more about me than I know about myself? And that's what I think it is.
One word, unity. So unity, going back to the point of history. History has made repetitive mistakes over and over again, and they were written down in history books, but they're only accessible to a very few who are educated. Internet has changed everything. People all around the globe can see what our governments are doing, what the corporations are doing, and what the previously more educated people have been privileged to be able to access or do with that information. So now the power has gone back slightly to the people. People are questioning everything around them a lot more. What are the corporations doing? There's a lot of like corporation, what's the word? Like sentience almost, like everyone's questioning everything, and we can easily find out information on the internet. However, the internet is still owned by the very few. So the Web3 is a movement. It's a transition built by the people who are completely just and utterly fed up of the olden approach towards how business is done, how corporations are managed, how people are mistreated. And although there's protests happening around the world for many different causes, nothing's been done about it really. Web3 is a step forward. It's about democratizing voting power. It's about democratizing data and ownership of your own data. I'm a gamer. Who's a gamer here? Raise your hands. We've got a couple people. Not that many, as many as I thought. Anyway, within games, you put a lot of time and effort in. Actually, all right, who here has a bank account? Thank you. That'll be a better case study. So with banks, there's actually been many banks that have failed. 2008 financial crisis, boom, I'm sure it affected plenty of you. Recently in America, SVB, along with a couple of other banks, have also liquidated. Their clients are still due money, and there's a lot of issues surrounding that. Why should we trust an entity which mismanages our either data or personal assets, such as money? If we do a bank run right now, not all of us will be able to get our money out, and that's a fact. So Web3 is actually the opposite of that. A blockchain is a distributed ledger which allows everyone to see all the data on there, and also how much currency is in reserves, how much is available. So it's fully accessible, so that there is no one left out. That's just an example that I'm making here. Also, digital ownership when it comes to gaming. There were a couple of people who raised their hands, so I'll go back to it. I played a lot of games. I put countless amount of hours towards games that I'm not going to be able to get any value out of from, besides memories with my friends and so forth. Today, I can't convert that into financial ownership. So I can't sell it. I can't do anything with it. And a lot of games go out of trend anyway. Whereas within the Web3 space, everything, or at least they're trying to make it interconnected. So if you play a game for however many hours and you get all these points and you get all these skins and armor and whatever, and then you grow up, eventually get a house, mortgage, kids, and you're fed up with gaming, you don't have the time for it. So what do you do with all that? Well, guess what? You can pass it on to another person. You can sell it. And this goes to other areas as well, such as, for example, healthcare. If you're trying to do good and you know that you've been in a position whereby your data can impact someone else's life on a positive level, then you can sell it back to people who can do well with that data, rather than it being sold to marketers, which can then market drugs to you. So yeah, see, that's just a couple of examples. But anyway, I could go on.
So the marketers are, let's look at it. And Milo?
In one word, I would say composability. I think the ethos behind having web protocols become decentralized. You might ask, what's the value of decentralization? Of course, we've spoken about a lot of that. One of the major benefits of decentralizing web protocols is that they become composable. That means that you can build on top of them, you can build with them, you can use them, they can be interoperable in many different ways. An example of why that's valuable is a company called Zynga back in 2011 built a game called Farmville, which was, in its day, the most successful game in the world. There are about 100 million users of Farmville. And they decided to build it on top of Facebook. They used Facebook's whole system and used Facebook's users to go into Farmville, and it was kind of built on Facebook. And it got so big that at one point, I think it made up 10% of Facebook's annual revenue was Farmville. Facebook decided, oh, hey, this is actually really valuable to us. We can just change the rules and do whatever we want. So the idea of having decentralized web protocols is that if you can have a say in this, you can own the protocols, you can govern the protocols yourself. And if they are decentralized, so if they are kind of user-owned and operated, that means that there isn't someone who can change the rules at any time. So you can have the assurances and the trust. If it's built on blockchain, you can trust the rules, you can trust the way that it's going to operate over time. You can then build an entire business, an entire life on top of a web protocol or using web protocols. And also they can be interoperable between them. So you can build your version of Twitter. Maybe you can use Twitter's posts if it was decentralized. You could use those posts with some videos from TikTok, and you could have all these different elements in your app. If it was all decentralized building blocks, you can build with them. And that, I think, is the real value of Web3 is composability.
Thank you, Milo. What I would like to bring now as another topic for our conversation is the challenges, because so far it seems we look at some of the opportunities, some of the bright sides, and that's where I find also from my interviews with artists, a lot of the issues that they were experiencing was in terms of actually there are not that many people that are actually adopting Web3. There is a lot of bad press around it. We heard about the scams. We heard about the issues even in potentially setting up the interface to navigate into the new web. So what do you see as the key challenge in the adoption of Web3?
Is that me?
Yeah.
User interfaces and accessibility and also education. There's certainly a lack of it. That's why we're very much working with an education space. So we've held talks at the House of Parliament, House of Lords in particular. We run employability workshops as well as just different workshops with universities. So we've done them at University of Surrey, Oxford, Greenwich, hopefully Sussex soon. And we're trying to make it more accessible to people. Unfortunately, as is with all new and complex technology, it's built by engineers and developers. So part of my responsibility when I was working for the AI company back in Taiwan was to communicate between the developers and the engineers, the heavily tech-sided people, translate what they're building over into common terms so that people can understand it, just the practical aspects of the technology that they're building. And they were developing in Chinese, so it was an extra step of trying to translate that. However, there's a big gap in between. So we need more people who are kind of like socially oriented, but can also understand the tech side of things. And Web3 is getting there. It's definitely getting there. There's far more platforms, which I'm more than happy to share, which provide free education. We're one of them. So Blockchain Sensei, provide education all across the UK, globally, on a corporate level, one-to-one. So we help businesses adopt new technologies, and this is all across the Web3 spectrum, including AI, IoT, robotics, 5G, etc. And we try and do one-to-ones, so employability too.
So education, you see it as one of the key challenges. Yes.
For sure.
Is it not all built by engineers?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, like, I'm a layman out there, but
Yeah.
all technology is built by engineers, so do they not have like where they want to go?
Can you repeat the question for the online audience?
Sorry, what am I repeating again?
I think because you mentioned that Web3, like blockchain, as an example, is built by engineers.
Yeah, correct.
I think
Each
that.
engineer is gonna
Oh, of course.
Sorry, I think
Oh, that's what you're saying. So sorry, yeah. Yeah, I misunderstood what you're saying there. Yeah, no, of course. And that's totally reasonable, what the point that you're trying to make. However, you've also got the people in between. So you always do. You've got the marketers. I mean, the engineers are not responsible for getting the vision and the mission out of the tech. They're in the nitty-gritties, right? They're doing C++, JavaScript, Solidity, whatever it may be. They're not out there portraying, unless you're a founder who's potentially is also in a CTO role, well, then that's slightly different, right? You got to take on you got to wear different hats. There's not that many people. So yes, you do need more people to translate the technology. And what I was trying to say earlier is blockchain Web3 is at a stage where it's starting to become more accessible outside of those silos of those heavily tech-sided people, because they were building initially the product for themselves because they understood global issues, but they didn't do a great job at user experience, user interface, interoperability between different applications. So they've got other people coming in, well, the common people, so to speak, who are just like, wait, hold on, we need to redesign what you've done, or at least build a layer on top of it so that it's more accessible.
Thanks, Kornel.
Thank you.
On that, Sonya?
I think we've kind of delved into the education part. So I'm gonna just echo everything that's been said. There is a lack of education. There's no doubt about that, right? But that comes from also a school level. That comes from, we have no idea. The people that are coming out of the system have no idea how to use it, but there's businesses being built around it. But two things that came to mind when you were speaking and when we were speaking is, I think we, unfortunately, as a society, have come to this point now where we're afraid to challenge because we're afraid of getting cancelled. And so there's the lack of curiosity that already does naturally exist. So you're in this gap where either you know or you don't know. And the people in the middle, which is most of us, are afraid of putting their hand up. That's why I use a Slido as an example, anonymously, to say something like, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I kind of don't want to say that I don't know what you're talking about because it makes me look silly, because it seems like you know what you're talking about and I should know that too. And I think with the amount of information that we are being just pushed at this point, a lot of us are afraid of putting our hand up and saying, I don't get it, and I need multiple moments of trying to get it. So what is the easiest way to get it? And also, do I need to even get this, right? Because I think we're also in that space. And so there's a challenge in the cancellation education part. There's also curiosity of, we don't know what we don't know. So these are great terms that are being used interchangeably, but we don't know what the relevant questions are because we don't even know what the future might look like. And so I think there's also a mismatch between, maybe we're just not dreaming or thinking big enough. And maybe a part of us is, and we're like, hey, actually, it's already been done. Like, how can we create another Facebook? Well, actually, someone needs to go create another Facebook, not me. I'm not going to take that one on. I've got other things to do, but someone needs to do it, because we can't just have one dude running these side of things. And I think a lot of us are afraid to be big and bold and kind of take a chance on ourselves. And that's probably another challenge when it comes to the work. And the last thing probably is community. Yes, it's great that we're all here. And I think that's a really big part of it. What are we going to do afterwards? Are we going to connect with each other? Are we going to keep the conversation going? Are we going to be accountable in our actions? And so it's great that we can talk about education and the lack of fund and the fact that, you know, crypto dudes are getting rich. But I think a lot of it comes back to accountability of what are we doing to make sure things are changing, curiosity so we can ask the relevant questions, and also not being afraid of being challenged or being cancelled because you don't know what you don't know. And I just think we've got into this like really terrible loop that, with all due respect, we're having the same conversations here on a panel that you'll probably have at another event you're going, but we're covering the what and not the how, and the how really needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah, for community, come to Brighton Blockchain. We're great with that. I think the key challenge is the kind of separating the casino gambling aspect of it, because as you've mentioned, and as I think we've heard tonight, a lot of people's perceptions of Web3 and crypto is this kind of financial thing, this money thing, when actually it is a technology. And it has got this reputation, it's got this culture of financial speculation. Part of the reason for that is that we have, in most major blockchains over a few years ago, we have very high transaction fees in blockchains. At one point, I minted an NFT and it cost me £100 just in fees to mint it. Now, in that environment, you can't do anything that is low value. Yeah?
Just define what minting is for people.
Oh, sorry, making an NFT. Thank you. Yes, yes. Just making an NFT. But even just transacting a cryptocurrency or swapping one cryptocurrency for another, I think I've paid about £50 in transaction fees. The only way that that's viable is if you think you're going to make enough money from that to cover the cost of the fees. The only viable applications that can exist in that environment are ones that are based around money and making money and financial speculation. And so the underlying infrastructure of blockchain has created this culture of financial speculation.
Thank you, Milo. Thank you, Sonia and Kornel. We're reaching the end of our session and of the panel session, and I had a question for you. Actually, coming from the point of, we've seen a lot of the questions about the technology. We heard about the engineers that are programming a lot of these things. And I heard from a lot of people that also from the Slido, that it's almost like a problem in search of a solution. So what I would like us to almost end our panel on is an idea of what are the problems that potential leaders could be looking at to solve through blockchain and through Web3 that we are not possibly thinking about. So what are the problems where this technology could help us as a tip potentially for you to live with and explore maybe tomorrow?
Shall I start? Yes. I think centralized networks are the big problem. Again, with things like Twitter and Facebook, the fact that they're centralized means that there's no real competition. You can't leave Facebook. I mean, if you leave Facebook, you're just off Facebook. There is no competitor where there is also a social graph. There are people that you can have as friends, whatever. So it's kind of in or out. With decentralization and with blockchain and with Web3, you can have competition. That's one of the main advantages, really. That's it.
Great question. I don't want to digress into too many areas. But okay. Well, ownership is one. We already spoke about it. I could either dive into, I think, community. Okay, I'll focus on community instead, because I could dive into different industries, but community is a brilliant example of how Web3 is utilized. Web3, the people who are within Web3, they are strong advocates for in real life events. They love parties and they love meeting up in person. So they're tech nerds, or they stemmed from tech nerds like myself, and they ended up swapping it over into an emphasis on participation, equality, and distribution of power, wealth, of just voting rights. So they do this through community means, and a lot of the blockchains, a lot of the most, you think that, you know, when you invest into cryptocurrencies is for self-investment to just make a speculative profit, whereas in reality that money is actually turned into really good causes, and they get put in either to charity or for community purposes. There's a lot of really cool events happening
there, and I think we can share more resources. So Sonia, I think if you could wrap in 30 seconds,
because I'm not going to focus on the use case as much, but I'm just going to ask you a question. Who remembers having to pick your GCSE subjects? And often the GCSE subjects were something along the lines of your core subjects are maths, English, and science. And then you could pick an art, but if you pick up art, you can't do geography. And if you pick geography, you can't do business. And if you do business, you're not smart enough to do French. You know what I mean? And at this point, I'm kind of thinking, you know what? Web3 for me is the coming together of everything we kind of wanted to do as kids. We're allowed to break stuff. We're allowed to fix it. We're allowed to think big. We're being creative. We have no idea what the future holds, but we're given that chance again just to go and figure it out. And then we're rewarded for figuring something out. So me, it's kind of like, I don't want to focus on just the use cases. I think what it's doing is it's bringing on all of these skills that we've once forgotten of, we once wanted to use, and we're able to use it in a very creative way and still be logical, still be pragmatic. You can be art and you can be maths, and you can be business, and you can be sports, and you can be French, and you can be Spanish, and you can be DT, all in one go, because it's literally what we make of it. And I think if we think of Web3 like that, it's, we don't know what we don't know. So why don't we just go break a bunch of stuff and then just figure out how to build it better for ourselves? And that's kind of where I'd end it.
Thank you, because you actually allow me to finish on one note that I was thinking how to wrap it up. We are in a transition, but the future, quoting Natasha Bedingfield, and I'm giving away my age now, the rest is still unwritten. So on this note, I would like to open the floor for your questions. 3 questions. Yeah. Fantastic. So as we are talking about Web3, guess what? We have time for 3 questions. So let's try to go one set, front, middle, and back, so we have all the room represented.
Hello. So I think this is for Kornel probably. I don't have any knowledge really about the blockchain, but one of the big things for me that freaks me out a little bit is the impact on the climate. So I guess imagining a complete energy crisis, sorry, this is a bit dystopian, but what would happen if we had no access to energy? How would the blockchain work? How would we be able to access our funds?
Okay, so it's your question is not around the impact that it has on the energy crisis.
No,
not at all. Okay, good, because that's a hoax.
Yeah.
Yes, you're very right to point that out. But if you think about banking, well, we've moved already into digital banking as it is. I mean, if technology was to be disrupted in a way whereby internet goes down, well, everyone's fucked completely. Every single industry is gone. Forget about it. Healthcare and everything relies on computers. So not only is the blockchain and Web3 space down, everyone's down. So I think, yeah, I mean, you're totally right to point that out, but I think everyone should be concerned in general, whether you're on Web3 or not, just regarding that question in particular. If it was surrounding the energy crisis and whether it's contributing to it, it's not. And also a lot of the founders that I know, which are running the blockchains, they're very environmentally conscious. And so they actually plug in a lot of the mines over to renewable energy sources, such as dams or what's it called? The air propellers. I can't remember. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So can we go towards this side, or any question from this side of the room? Over. Thanks, Maureen. And then we're going to come back to the...
I think this is probably for Milo, I'm not sure, but in terms of the way that blockchain works and looking at finance, it seems to be that centralized systems are faster and cheaper and less energy requirement. I know that sort of data mining, mining has been a way of validating the blockchain. Is there any kind of movement on that to a faster, cheaper way of validating the blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like you're mainly talking about Bitcoin when you say that, which is kind of the face of cryptocurrency. But it is also the oldest cryptocurrency, and it's also the least flexible, the one that really doesn't change at all. So yeah, it's mined with computers. Now that is very old. It is actually the only major blockchain that uses energy to work, basically. So all other blockchains don't use energy like that, or basically they don't use energy at all, apart from being online. It's, yeah, slow and expensive. Well, actually, it's not that slow compared to most financial systems, given that they take about 3 days to settle fully on international transactions and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I guess it's a bit slow. But again, most other blockchains, I mean, Ethereum has blocks every 12 seconds, but you can also have pre-confirmations that are within milliseconds. So no, it's instant. And expensive, yes. Again, fees were very high. They're not high now. And going forward, I mean, the big scaling problem is in the fees, and that is being solved everywhere in every blockchain. And yeah, it's the big bottleneck, but it's in the same way like the early internet was very slow, and you couldn't have images or videos. It just wasn't feasible. You just have text. But then it got faster because those problems were solved and it scaled. That's the same thing with fees. So yes.
So time for our last question. Over here. Maybe it's faster for me.
Sorry, this one kind of stems from curiosity. So I have a somewhat uncommon skin disease. And so when I go to the doctor for healthcare, because you're 48% more likely with HS to have lupus and stuff, they collect my data. I can't really, since I've done it in the US, I can't really opt out of it. So what can you say with We3, how would that be relatable so I could have ownership of my data? Not to compare it to Henrietta Lacks, but I don't have support. If they find some upcoming thing and it's privatized and made money, is there a possibility that I could have ownership of something like that?
I live, breathe blockchain. Yes, full ownership. So the technology is built in a way whereby we've never seen anything like it, to be honest with you. I've looked into the tech. It is there. It works somehow. However, so let's take ourselves back to caveman times when people transacted based on goods. Before banks were ever a thing, before any intermediaries ever existed, and people relied on trust to one another. I give you 2 cows in exchange for that amount of corn. So that's how a blockchain essentially works. So to break it down into layman terms, you transact peer-to-peer, and the algorithms prove that. So any kind of information that you would essentially validate, for example, so one of the healthcare companies that we work with, it would be transacted through you as an individual and put onto, let's say, a smart contract, which would only enable you to have full ownership of that data and accessibility as well. So you can either share it with your doctor or doctors or the hospital or some sort of other organization, depending on how you want to distribute your own data. And it would be only accessible to those which would have, the keys to it. So yeah, and that goes to, there's more questions.
One more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have a lot of questions.
I can answer it quickly.
Can I just say that I think what is evident also from the question is that we want potentially to continue this and to keep discussing. So what I would like to say is that there is also a Web3 enabled way to do this and to allow you to potentially, if you have never done anything in Web3, we created an opportunity to mint what is called the proof of attendance protocol, which is a basic badge on Web3 that shows that tonight you've been here and we can keep being connected as a community. So we can leave this as, we can continue the conversation after the panel and—
It's more of a remark, it's not a question.
Yes.
I just I think I cornered Sonya a little bit. I'm a passionate environmentalist and I volunteer a lot for the community and I also stand for culture. I am a little bit upset when people talk about the blockchain's impact on the environment, while they have a utilized traditional banking system, how to do so since they're about 12. The current traditional financial systems, they utilize an enormous amount of carbon, they have an enormous carbon footprint, and I'd like us to start challenging those individuals and not actually blockchain and cryptocurrencies, because they tend to be far more environment friendly, and farmers who build cryptocurrencies actually rely on renewable energy, and they are far more environmentally minded. And when we're talking about paying the fees for elevated gas prices and all those things, is because those farmers, those individuals actually work on offsetting their climate impact, whereas big financial institutions that we all bank with globally do not. So we need to really not think of blockchain as something that is actually negative on our environment, but we need to look at the context. That's all I wanted to say.
And on this, I think we can then work with our next meetup on the green software. So thank you a lot for coming. It has been an absolute pleasure to be here. And if you want to continue the conversation, please join us the panel, and a big thanks to all of the panelists and to you.